Hey, it's TDA, and this is a guide on how to complete every single mission with all the different types of disasters in Extinction Day. Now, as you can see, I've already done that, and yes, that includes this level, but for some reason it was bugged, even though I already completed it several times on the highest difficulty. So let's get to it. Okay, so let's talk about perks first. First of all, you always want to pick up passive damage, because likely you're going to be using at least one passive disaster anyway, so you might as well boost that up. And for the same reason, you kind of always want to pick up one of the other ones that allow you to increase the damage of that passive disaster as well. So for example, if you're playing with a biohazard, pick that one up, and then you get the 35%, depending on your level of course, along with the 20% or whatever level you have on that one as well. These two together will then just massively boost that damage, and it also kind of predetermines which disaster you're going to be using. On top of that, you are also going to want to pick up some of the upgrades that help you with your currencies. Free enhancements is pretty much the one I always pick. 12 free enhancements at level 3 is equivalent to almost 50 souls by itself. So, you know, that is easily going to pay for itself, and it's also going to be better than Quick Start. And on top of that, Influenced is always really nice to give yourself that little quick boost at the beginning, so you can kind of pick up some of those passive upgrades that you're going to want anyway. Then that kind of already fixes 4 slots, so the last one is very flexible. If you feel like you have everything under control, you can pick up the XP boost. More experience is never a bad thing. If you want to play it a little bit more safe, pick something that's, actually going to help you in the level, which is likely going to be more energy. This is always a very nice one to have. It allows you to spread faster. It allows you to use your active abilities more often. It's just good to have. I would, generally speaking, not go for things like slow alertness or anything that deals with the arc or the shuttle. If you need these, you're probably already losing. And picking something that's actually going to help you win faster is better than something that helps you lose slower, if that makes sense. If you want to be lazy, Corrupted is kind of nice. 10 corruption points is a fair amount, but if you are already picking up influence, you should probably have enough influence points to just get whatever corruption points that you need. Similarly speaking, pretty much all the other upgrades I would typically not consider, with the 2 exceptions. Weaker Humans is especially useful if you're going for one of those speed races. Always good to have, everything be weakened by a considerable amount. And Quick Start in some cases can be useful. It again gives you that little boost at the beginning, and the beginning is always the slowest part. So it's worth considering if you do not want to pick up the XP boost or one of the other ones that I just mentioned. When it comes to spending your influence points, I would always recommend that you start with 1 or 2 levels of Public Hysteria events, because that's going to give you additional resource drops, which is going to give you additional influence, or souls, depending on what you want. So this is going to pay for itself easily, so pick this up as soon as you can. For the same reason, picking up at least 1 level of Trust Issues is going to pay for itself really easily as well, so you might as well pick that up if you have enough influence points to do so. Then, second priority is going to be picking up a level of Media Disinformation. This is just going to buy you a little bit of extra time, not really what we're picking this up for though, because that will allow us to get to Moral Decay. Again, not really what we're going for, because what we really want is a level of influence control. This is going to allow you to keep the countermeasures under control by spending less corruption points, and basically guaranteeing you a success if you want to spend at least 4 points, making sure that you don't need to deal with too many issues. Now, you want to pick this up as soon as the countermeasures are up and running, or slightly before that ideally. So this is not necessarily a high priority, so if there is something more urgent that you need to get in order to make your disaster function optimally, and there's a couple of ones that really benefit from getting some upgrades over here, for example, then feel free to pick that up first. Just make sure that you pick this up straight after. For most disasters, I would recommend just having the auto collect set on influence all the time. You can get souls elsewhere, but you can only get influence through the drops. And then just start buying any upgrades that you might find useful. Typically, I would recommend getting things like Bureaucratic Efficiency to get some of the countermeasures under control. I would not recommend getting Widespread Panic. The Global Decay, once it starts, you're kind of already winning anyway, so that's typically just a win more button. The other upgrades, like, for example, Increased Fear and Worldwide Disorganizations, are typically not that useful, not worth spending your points on. On the other hand, pretty much anything on the top left is going to be useful. So, increasing your damage, increasing your attack size, that's just always useful. If it comes down to getting more souls, you know, you could pick those up. Typically, you do have enough just by default already. Getting one level in this is never a bad thing, though, because it's so cheap. And the same holds here. So getting at least one level of passive energy production is never a bad thing. If you are using active abilities, reducing the cost of those is very useful as well. So, you know, if you're heavily relying on those, by all means, pick that up. Systemic negligence is not that useful, increasing the maximum energy. You know, you want to be spending your energy, so if you're saving it up, I'm not sure what you're doing. And that kind of solves all of this. If you're getting enough influence to buy a lot of these, then you're probably doing something very well already. Now, before I will go into the disaster-specific strategies, I will note that there's a bug in the game, or at least I think it's a bug, that allows you to just pick a active disaster as your first disaster, and then you will already start getting your pop-ups, if you can see over here. So you can just start collecting influence, for example. Now, as you can see, I'm not gaining any alertness, but I am getting my resource drops, so I could just clear out the entire technology tree, stack up on 50 souls. I could even upgrade my active disaster as well to the max. It would be very boring because you will have to sit around doing nothing for a very long time, but it will give you a massive boost to get started with. This seems to work in pretty much every mission, so, you know, take advantage of this if you need to, but you can actually win the game on Cataclismic without taking advantage of this as well. Okay, so let's talk about storms. Storms have a low expand speed, at least that's what it tells you, but it also comes with an ability to increase that quite substantially. Now, this ability is actually similar to the one on the far right, which allows you to increase the rapid speed enhancer effect. But the big difference is that in order to get this effect, you first need to buy the ability, and then you also need to buy the rapid enhancer. So I would typically recommend just skipping this completely and just picking at least 1 or 2 levels of the atmospheric pressure. This is going to be a one-time investment that will just keep piling on for the rest of the game. And honestly, even though it has a low expand speed, the expansion speed is fast enough for one or two of these levels to be more than you can handle. Now, it also says that the increased effectiveness is in coastal damage areas. So if you go back to the world map, that kind of means that you want to start in Asia East and Saigon to be exact, because this is a very high population in coastal areas, and that's where your storm is going to be most effective. After that, storms kind of play themselves. You want to pick up at least a level of wind speed so you can then get access to your tornado clusters. Make sure you pick that up next. And then it's kind of up to you what you do. I would highly recommend picking up at least 1 level of lightning strikes so that you can get access to the additional damage. And then after that, probably go for atmospheric efficiency to make sure you get even more tornadoes. And then just start upgrading your tornadoes, and of course make sure you upgrade your wind speed as well, because this is just going to make everything you do that much more efficient. Once you have most of these upgrades, feel free to toss in, for example, warm air mass as well. This is going to increase your damage by quite a bit as well. The other 2 upgrades over here are a little bit more situational, so these are not the highest priority, but if you have the souls, pick them up anyway. Once you do that, then you should be spreading across the world quite quickly. Make sure that if you go for your upgrades, I would typically recommend going for the resource boost along with energy efficiency and either amplified damage or area increase. Area increase in particular is kind of nice because you already get the area increase from a lot of your abilities anyway, so that just kind of wipes out the entire map. But for the same reason, you could also argue that you should go for amplified damage to add the damage to all the damage, or all that area that you're covering. Either way, if you do go for energy efficiency, that should allow you, especially if you combine it with the upgrade over here, emergency response failure, that should allow you to spread into at least 3 to 4 zones, depending on which zones we're talking about. The smaller zones you can probably add in a 5th, but you only kind of need to be in 3 or 4 at the same time anyway to wipe out the world. That said, Storms is kind of an underpowered disaster, I think, so you kind of want to pick up at least 1 active disaster along with it to kind of clear out the straggling zones around the world near the end. Now, you might be inclined to go with tornadoes, but honestly, tornadoes by themselves kind of don't do much. The nice thing about tornadoes is that you can get the upgrade for the increased souls. So, you know, if you want to use this early on to kind of farm some additional souls, you could, but it's gonna have a hard time paying for itself. The multi-vortex is definitely an upgrade that you need to get in order to make it do any damage to begin with. And the larger vortex and other upgrades that you have above here do make it a little bit easier to use, but all in all, the tornado is really underwhelming in terms of the amount of power it's going to give you. It's really cheap to get all of these upgrades, so if you have, like near the end of the game, you have some souls to spare anyway, you could as well pick it up. But honestly, at that point, you're probably winning anyway. Now, asteroids, on the other hand, are much more powerful and much more flexible in terms of how you can use them. So if you pick up asteroids, it's a lot more expensive than the tornadoes, but they pack a much bigger punch as well. You always want to make sure that you grab the impact cloud first, because that's just going to give you a lot more damage and a lot more coverage. And especially considering the accuracy of the asteroid can be a little bit on the low side. This just makes the impact zone big enough that you don't really care about it. And then on top of that, make sure you pick up at least one level of large stellar objects just to increase the damage size a little bit further. And then the cosmic twin, so you get 2 asteroids for the price of 1. Once you have this, then you could also pick up cosmic precision. Honestly, this is not a high priority. What I would recommend that you do first is make sure you decrease the cost by picking up the 2 levels of cosmic energy. This is just going to allow you to spam these asteroids all over the place, and you can kind of clear out whatever you need to do. The winter ash upgrade is really nice as well, and similarly the radioactive debris again is really powerful. If you have a completely upgraded asteroid, it's going to pack a massive punch, and you can pretty much take out entire zones just with asteroids themselves. And that brings us to Respiratory Outbreak, which I think is one of the strongest disasters in the entire game. You typically want to start out in, for example, something like Asia West, just something with a large population and a large amount of souls. And the reason for that is very simple. If you look at the skill set that this comes along with, it has a pretty expensive upgrade that increases 50% souls in every region that it's in. This is going to pay for itself really quickly, so honestly this is one of the things I pick up first to begin with. That also means that if you're playing with this specific disaster, getting the additional souls at the beginning of the game through your perks can be really valuable, just so you can actually pick this up really quickly and have it pay for itself right away. Now after that, this sickness becomes all about spreading across the entire world without getting noticed, at least as long as you can. Even on Cataclismic difficulty, that is quite possible to do, at least spreading into 2 or 3 zones before anyone notices that you're even there. Now how do you do that? You want to pick up the RNA resistance, because this is going to increase the energy that you're producing by a tiny little bit. It's pretty cheap, but it also doesn't really do much. What you're really after is the DNA efficiency. This is going to give you a 20% increased energy enhancer effect. So every time you click a zone and you go into this energy enhancer, this is going to give you a massive reduction once you pick up that skill. So by itself, it's going to reduce the energy cost by 2, but if you combine it with this particular skill, it's going to kind of double that effect on top of that. Then if you combine that with the influence upgrade over here, that is going to give you an additional 100% bonus to your energy efficiency. You can kind of see where this is going. You're going to be able to sit in every large zone for a very small energy cost, and on top of that, if you combine that with the passive energy production, and ideally also with the passive perk that gives you additional energy production as well, you can almost sit in every zone across the entire world from the beginning of the game, at least as soon as you spread to that, without any effort, because you will have plenty of energy to do that. Then once you are actually in the several zones, then of course you want to start upgrading your damage. Picking up the pulmonary attack is going to be mandatory at first. Depending on where you start, if you are starting in Asia, I would recommend that you pick up the hot damage, because most of the zones adjacent to that starting area are hot zones as well, so this is just going to up your damage a little bit. And then the main thing that's going to help you kind of quickly wipe out the world is going to be the aerosol transmission, which is going to help you with the amplified damage effect, as well as with the fever spikes, which is going to give you a massive amount of crit chance. Now, these 2 abilities combined is going to increase the, generally speaking, pretty low damage of the outbreak by so much that, yeah, things are going to go downhill for those people that are sick really, really fast. What I would typically therefore recommend is that you pick up the resource boost, because these 40% souls on top of the additional souls that you're already getting is going to get you something like 70 plus souls on the larger zones and 30 to 40 plus on the smaller zones. You are going to have all the souls in the world to spend on whatever skills that you need. So yeah, pick that up. And then for this third ability, pick up the amplified damage, or initially you might want to pick up the rapid spread for the first zone as well. This will help you get started a little bit faster, but honestly it's completely up to you. I think both of these tactics might work as well. Alright, so let's talk about warfare. Warfare, you want to start out in Asia West once more, and you'll see why in a second. But once we do this and we go to the overview here, we're going to see that there's a reference to a blood mechanic. Now, this is what you want to pick up first. You will need blood to actually be able to spread your disaster. So you want to start upgrading your blood initially. This is going to cost you quite a bit of souls, so make sure that you either start with a lot of souls to begin with, or that you set your auto collect to souls collection initially rather than influence, what we use for most of the other disasters. If you get the first 3 levels, this is going to take something close to 40 souls altogether, I think. So this is quite a heavy investment, but you're going to need every single drop of blood that you can get. After that, what you want to pick up next is the first level of political instability. This is also why we're beginning in Mumbai, because it has a very large population that's unstable. Alternatively, you could also start in Africa. That also kind of works, but the larger population is in Mumbai, so you might as well start there. And then pick up a level of, well, the only level actually, of rapid escalation. This is going to decrease the amount of blood you need to expand. And again, you want to kind of grab this before the first time you expand, because if you look at the amount that you need to expand, I can't actually show you because it hasn't spread yet, but the first expansion will cost you 4,000 blood, so decreasing that to 3,000, make sure that this thing kind of already pays for itself. Not necessarily when you look at the soul cost, but at least the blood cost will have paid for itself already. Now, once you have those 4 skills, so 3 levels of this and rapid escalation on top of that, with of course 1 level of political instability, then you can actually kind of start thinking about doing some damage and getting more blood as a result of that. Getting the increased troops is by far the cheapest way of doing that. And if you're in the poor zone, which we are already in as well, then getting the bribe recruits is going to be pretty useful. The Arctic training is typically not worth getting until you spread around the northern part of the planet a little bit further. But what you should be getting pretty early on is the tank deployment. It's pretty cheap. It costs 2,000 blood, but as soon as you get your ability going a little bit, this is not going to be that much at all. And then after that, pick up the first level of battleships as well. This is basically just going to make sure that you have multiple attacks coming into all of your zones at the same time. After that, I would recommend kind of leaving the ships alone until you have most of the other upgrades. Picking up the ground invasion as well as the demolition troops is going to be very useful to upgrade your damage. And the nice thing about this is that it doesn't actually cost you any blood to upgrade. Neither do these upgrades here either. The nice thing about that is that you're going to need your blood to expand, so you might as well get abilities that do additional damage without costing you blood. All of the other abilities do cost you some blood, and they're honestly not that powerful if you compare that to the other upgrades that you can get without spending blood anyway. However, getting at least 1 level of enhanced shells will also allow you to get ground superiority, assuming you've already picked up these. And this is just going to give you a massive increase to the coverage radius. So this is going to be a very strong thing to pick up. After that, it kind of doesn't matter what you pick. I would not generally recommend, however, that you pick up the blood money, because yeah, sure, this is going to give you a lot of blood, but it's only 10,000. That sounds like a lot in the beginning, but it's really not. So the cost of this is kind of prohibitive. If it's the last thing you get, sure. But other than that, what you do want to get, however, is Amplified Strike. This is going to make sure that your amplified damage and area increase are going to be that much stronger. So typically what I would say, if you are looking at upgrades initially, pick up the resource boost because you still want those extra souls, and then you can just pick up amplified damage and area increase to do massive amounts of damage and really be able to spread your armies around the globe a lot faster. Now, the main issue with warfare is actually that it's kind of hard to kill everyone in the entire world with just using that. So if you're gonna have to go into something on top of that anyway, I would recommend going with airstrike, because this is again a warfare type of disaster, so it benefits from the same bonuses, and it also produces blood, so that's actually kind of nice. If you look at how this works, it's kind of special. It has 2 modes, so you can switch between these 2 modes. It's the same It actually doesn't tell you here which one is which, but it happens to correlate exactly with the left side and the right side of the upgrades. So the left hand upgrades are for the left hand ability, the right hand for the right hand. I typically only use the left one because I like that one a lot better. And the nice thing about the left one is, once again, that the upgrades here do not cost any blood. Now, the upgrades on the right hand side do not all cost blood either, but some of them do, and especially the more expensive ones cost a pretty massive amount of blood. So I figured, why not just keep it simple and stay on the left side. Now, the nice thing about this is that if you get the initial upgrades, it will start dropping additional bombs. And let me just show you how this thing works in case you don't know. It will send an airplane and it will come in and it will drop a couple of bombs like this. Now, that by itself is not super effective, but once you start upgrading this, it will start dropping more bombs that also do more damage, so that's worth it. Getting the increased souls is actually kind of nice as well. It's super cheap to get, so it's kind of like a tornado, but it's a lot more efficient. And then just upgrading the damage size and the damage themselves, along with, especially here near the end, you can get the bleed damage. This leaves kind of a cloud of toxic gas behind. It kind of turns these bombs into mini asteroids, which also happen to kind of correlate very well with all the other abilities that you've picked up for warfare. So this is the perfect thing to accompany your warfare with. Speaking of which, we also have Civil War. Now, I have to say this is probably my least favorite passive disaster. You can actually put it on a place that you already have something else as well, so this kind of makes it nice to go along with warfare, for example, because again it benefits from the same bonuses. But the main problem I have with this specific ability is that it only spreads to a single zone. It's kind of supposed to be a support ability, but like it says over here, you can only deploy it to one territory at a time. You can redeploy it wherever you want, but it still costs you something. And honestly, if you already have an upgraded disaster in a zone, that is probably going to be able to take care of everything by itself. So you kind of don't need a second one. But anyway, let's say you still want to use this. How do you actually use it? Well, picking up the Civil War expand cost before you actually move it to a new zone is probably best, so make sure you pick it up just before you move. And then, yeah, everything else here is kind of okay, I suppose. Things down the middle line here are things that you definitely want to get. So the increased riot size, along with the burning buildings and the sky patrol, is just going to give you flat damage increases to everything this ability does, so that's kind of nice. And then here on the sides, you have very specific types of damage. So depending on where this is placed, so let's say you have placed it in a rich and cold area, so for example, somewhere in Europe, yeah, sure, then pick this up. It will do a little bit of extra damage, but as you can see, the amount of damage that you gain from this is pretty small. It's also pretty cheap, so you might as well pick it up. But yeah, you know, if you're already working on that area, it's probably going to be dying anyway. This is not going to make the difference. But I'm kind of repeating myself. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say you get access to Public Services Crisis. This is actually going to massively increase the damage of this. Now, however, this is going to require you to get Paramedic Response Breakdown first. Now, if we go down to the Influence tree, that is the one all the way down here. That means that you need to get this, and this, at least one level of each, before you can actually unlock that ability. Is that worth it? Probably not. I mean, those abilities by themselves are useful. But gating this behind that specific ability is not, I think, my favorite choice. Getting the Global Decay boost, additional damage again. If you have the Global Decay in action, then you are probably already winning. So, not super useful. The Disaster combo is, of course, something you kind of always want to get, because you're supposed to be combining this with another disaster anyway, so getting the 50% increased riots is going to definitely increase the damage. If you combine this with the passive perk that also gives you additional damage if you have two different disasters in the same zone, then of course this is going to be a pretty potent mix. But yeah, think about whether or not you actually need this before you start spending a lot of souls into it. So let's talk about our zombies next. Now the zombie disaster is kind of interesting because the initial thing that you get doesn't actually do any damage. So if you go to our zone over here, I like starting out in Mumbai, but honestly you can kind of start out wherever you want, because what you can do is just sit around waiting, see your infection go throughout the entire world, and the alertness will stay just where it is, because no one is actually dying or taking damage from this disease until you decide that time has come. Now the nice thing is, the little airplanes that you see flying around actually have a small chance to spread the disease across the world. So if you just sit around here waiting, the disease will actually spread across the entire world and infect everyone. That by itself is not going to win you, however, and that also means that you will actually have to start upgrading some of the things in here. Now, what you can do is make sure that you have your resource drops just set to souls, because that way you will still get some souls and you can start upgrading your zombies. What I would recommend that you do is pick up the increased levels of these abilities over here. Getting additional damage is nice, getting the additional speed is very nice as well, but honestly all of these upgrades are equally nice. So just get one level of each and then the second level of each, etc. This one over here is useful, but mostly after you have several zombies already running around in the world, because this will allow you to get even more. So this is just a win more button, but getting at least one level of this is going to be super useful. So how do you actually get your zombies? Now what I would recommend that you do, especially if you're going through the slow approach, is upgrade your zombie mutation ability on the left side as much as possible, at least to make sure that you do enough damage, because the zombies will only spawn after a certain amount of people have died in the zone. Once you have your first zombie in a zone, you no longer need to use this ability. This is an active ability that will pop over here, that you actually need to click on an ability and it will start doing some damage. But once you have your first zombie in a zone, just move on to a next zone and make sure you spawn a zombie there. In order to help out with that, especially as once you decide to, flip the switch and make sure you start killing people around the world, make sure that you also get the virus damage upgrade. This is going to automatically have your infection do damage to the infected. It's going to raise the alertness by quite a bit, but honestly, the fact that it's raised doesn't really matter. The fact that it's actually doing damage will already alert everyone to your presence anyway, but it's going to help you passively spawn those zombies all around the world. Now, you do not necessarily need to get the infected on board. This will allow you to spread through your planes a lot faster. But yeah, unless you're doing the speed achievement, the speed run type of thing, if you're not in a hurry, you don't need this. The chance will be lower, but the planes will still be spreading across the world. Now let's say you are doing the speedrun achievement, you don't have enough time to just sit around waiting for your disease to spread across the entire world. Now what you can do in that case is just play this like a normal disaster. Make sure then that you upgrade at least a couple of levels into the mutation potency, so you get a little bit of extra power to your zombie mutation, maybe one level of mutation speed as well, so you can spam it a little bit faster. And then once you get your first zombie, just start upgrading your zombies as well. You should be using your mutation in the same spot over and over again, like I've done over here, so that you're actually killing people. Don't just spam it all around, because you need people to die in order for your first zombie to spawn. Now, this can take a little while and it will feel really slow initially, but once you get this going and you have your first zombie up and running, you're pretty much good to go. Do make sure in that case, however, that you pick the rapid spread, because the main issue with playing zombies normally without sitting around waiting for it a little while, is that your zombies tend to not spread fast enough to actually cover every single continent on the planet. I've had so many runs go wrong just because the zombies refuse to spread, for example, to America if I started out over here, or they actually skipped an island or something like that. So, you can just get unlucky. Make sure that you hedge against that as much as you can. Then last but not least, let's talk about the parasites. The parasites play quite differently again, because what they need in order to actually spread is hitting certain thresholds of infected people. This is again why you want to start out in Asia West, because this simply has the most people in it, so it also offers the most potential in order to meet those thresholds, because they will keep increasing every time you hit one of them. That also means that you probably want to get at least 1 or 2 levels of the propagation efficiency, because this allows you to spread faster. And you also want to make sure you have the infection burst up and running, at least with 1 or 2 levels initially, because this will help you actually infect people in all of those zones. Once you get the infection rates and the spreading under control, you want to make sure you get energetic requirements level 2, so 2 levels in this. This will decrease the energy cost for getting this parasite up and running in a zone by 50% just by itself. And that's just going to make sure you can stay in two times as many zones as normal. Now, if you combine this with the energy efficiency and you combine that with the usual combination of emergency response failure, that is going to basically let you stay for free. Well, not entirely for free, but almost for free in the zone. So remember, normally it costs you 12 energy to sit in Mumbai. Now it only takes us 4. For some reason it says 4 over here and 5 over here, but you kind of get the point. Now, if you combine that with the upgrades that you have over here to increase the energy per cycle, you also get the influence upgrade over here to increase the energy production, and you have the passive that increases that even further, then you can kind of see where we're going. You can spread across the entire world. This is actually the one disaster that will allow you to easily spread across the entire world. And then once you have that done, make sure you start killing people as quickly as possible. You do that by making sure you get the aggressive mutation and the host breakdown over here. This will, of course, massively increase the alertness, but if you're playing on Cataclismic, people are going to notice you pretty fast anyway, so it's not really worth spending the amount of souls going into symptoms reduction and then definitely not going into symbiotic camouflage. This is actually going to reduce your damage. And at that point, once you have enough souls to get all of this unlocked, you're probably being spotted already anyway, so you might as well not bother. You also definitely want to pick up the random mutations, because this is going to allow you to spread even further. At some point, the amount of infections that you need in order to spread is going to go up so high, you will simply not have enough people in the world to do that. So make sure that you get that random mutation going to kind of get the last few steps in place. Now, if you get unlucky, sometimes you kill people too fast and you don't have enough people left in the world to actually infect, and therefore you cannot reach the corners. I would recommend just getting some asteroids to clean up the rest of the world, but keep an eye on that, because that can be an issue, especially on Cataclysmic. Although typically, because people have more HP on Cataclysmic, it's not as bad of a problem, weirdly enough, as it could be on lower difficulties where you can simply kill people too fast. This means that the last disaster that I haven't really discussed yet are volcanoes, and that's for a very good reason, because I think this is just not so good as the other disasters that you have access for this price. The volcanoes really need the lava blasts and the sulfur clouds to do any damage to begin with, and once you have them up and running, even then, they're kind of underwhelming in terms of the area they cover and the damage that they do. You really need to upgrade your lava blast impacts. The hot ash itself doesn't really do much, so you're going to have to turn to the left over here to increase the splash size, and then to increase the eruption duration as well. Now, once you have this up and running, you have a lot of those volcanoes all around, because they will stay active. So that's kind of the nice thing. You can see I placed down a couple of them already over here. You can place them all around the world wherever you want. Once you do have them up and running, you have access to this ability over here, Seismic Shockwave. You can get that 3 times, and each time you get this upgrade, it will trigger a one-time massive eruption on all of these volcanoes that you currently have active. So assuming you have like 9 or 12 of them active, something along those lines, it's probably around the maximum that you can get. You can then kind of trigger all of them and do a lot of damage across the entire world. The main issue with that is that once you have invested enough points into this that you can actually do all of that damage, then you probably are already winning the game, hopefully, because volcanoes by themselves are not going to win you the game. Or the volcanoes will already have done so much damage before you trigger this that most of the people around the volcano are going to be dead anyway. Now, don't forget, this is a pretty large attack size, so it's going to take out some more people. It's just kind of underwhelming. What it is really good for, however, is if you place down a couple of volcanoes like this, let's say this is the last zone that you need, if you then trigger it, you know, you can easily take out a zone just with volcanoes themselves. But yeah, like I said, not entirely sure if this is the best thing you could be doing. You could also just be getting asteroids and do the same thing, but probably in a more efficient way. That's just me. Let me know what you think in the comments. So I hope you found this useful to get all of your own full Cataclismic achievements, as well as all of the challenges that are very similar to the main missions as well. Let me know in the comments if you want to see a specific playthrough. I can make them, but honestly, giving you these shorter, more detailed, just step-by-step instructions on what to do is probably going to be more useful for you than actually following me along through a playthrough, because it's a lot of clicking back and forth. I actually tried making one of those videos and I didn't find it very watchable. So, but anyway, let me know in the comments if you do want to see something like that. It's pretty easy to make if you want them. Now, if you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.